Production support for INFocus is provided by Hoosier Energy, providing electricity for Central and Southern Indiana electric cooperatives and their member customers. Information at hepn.com. In Stride Magazine, Learn, Heal, Live, South Central Indiana's health and wellness magazine, featuring articles and ideas with activities for staying physically and mentally healthy. Inside the Herald Times, every second Monday, monthly. myinstride.com. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
In the midst of an economic recession, war, and developing international relations, the nation's hope may not be in the form of a monetary solution, but instead the philanthropy of the American people. What motivates these extraordinary individuals working to give back to their communities? Tonight we find out more as we go in focus on community service and volunteerism. Hi, I'm Ann Shea. We welcome our WTIU viewers and WFIU listeners to the show. And tonight we also welcome panelists from around the Monroe County area to discuss community service organizations and the volunteers who make a difference. If you have a comment or a future question, email us at infocus@indiana.edu and we'll try our best to address your comment or question on the show. Well, from a young 7-year-old girl to community residents reaching out through service, some corporations wouldn't exist without the assistance of volunteers. According to the Corporation for National and Community Service, Indiana's 1.5 million volunteers rank 11th in the nation for most hours donated. Hoosier generosity is making a difference not just here in Indiana, but in the international community as well. Here's one local girl's story, an example of what we'll discuss on tonight's show.
A once sad and scared little girl has a new twinkle in her eye and a new purpose in life for her peers and the whole world, taking on a fundraising and awareness project.
I would hope people would understand what it's like to have a parent with cancer.
The American Cancer Society estimates more than 1.4 million cancer cases a year in the United States affect individuals and their families. One of them is Camille Caruso.
I was diagnosed with stage 3 colorectal cancer, and it was very aggressive.
Bella was just 5 years old when Camille was diagnosed with colorectal cancer in June of 2006. Bella needed an outlet to express her feelings and emotional support from others who were feeling
really sad,
because they also had loved ones fighting cancer. Since 2000, Camp Kesem, a week-long summer camp, assists children whose parents have had cancer, currently have, or have died from cancer. Bella wanted to do more, so she started Templeton Kids Fighting Cancer.
Where do you want it? Because I want to help Camp Kesem, and I want to help other people understand what cancer is and make them feel better if they have a parent with cancer.
Bella shows that you can make a difference at any age. Tonight, community service and volunteerism are in focus.
And joining me in the WFIU radio booth is News Director Stan Jastrzebski. Stan, give us an update on who will be joining you tonight.
And later in the show, I'll talk live in studio with Ivy Tech Bloomington Chancellor John Weikart, and I'll have phone conversations with former Indianapolis Mayor and now AmeriCorps board member Steve Goldsmith and National Head of Habitat for Humanity Mark Andrews. That comes up later. Right now, back to you.
Looking forward to it. Thanks, Stan. Our first topic highlights community service and how organizations use volunteers. In fact, some statistics from the Corporation for National Community Service show on average, Indiana has 1.5 million volunteers with an average volunteer rate of 30%. Between 2005 and 2007, Hoosiers donated an estimated 215 million hours of their time to make a difference in the lives of friends, family, and even complete strangers. Well, joining me tonight is Dr. Beth Gaisley, Assistant Professor in the School of Public and Environmental Affairs at Indiana University. Barry Lesso, Executive Director of the United Way of Monroe County. And finally, Elizabeth Betts Savage, Director of the City of Bloomington's Volunteer Network. Thank you all so much for being here. We really appreciate it. Let's talk first of all about those statistics that we just saw. Tell me, do you agree? Are they a little bit off, or is this where we're going in the state of Indiana? Beth?
Well, I think there's always good news and bad news with those statistics. Indiana does compare favorably with the nation. One of the things that concerns me about these volunteer rates, though, is if you look at the trends, the rate hasn't changed much over time nationally. So we can't rest on our laurels. We have to continue to work very hard to involve people, particularly young people, in volunteering.
Bet you wanted to add to that?
Well, I think Indiana is part of the heartland, so that says something, right? Also, we're not as people are not as overscheduled as they are on the coast, for example, where they just really have trouble fitting in the time to volunteer. Most people say, actually studies have shown that people find the time to volunteer by watching a little bit less TV. I don't know what you think about that, though.
Barry, I mean, do you agree with that? I mean, do you see that trend here in Monroe County with the United Way? Or?
Absolutely. Hoosiers are incredibly generous people, and that goes for all the people who live here in Monroe County and throughout South Central Indiana. We noticed, though, that about 46% of the people we spoke with who didn't volunteer mentioned it was because of time constraints. And so I think suggestions like the one Bet just offered are very helpful. We also noticed that about a quarter of nonprofit agencies in Monroe County had what they described as major difficulty in retaining volunteers. And about another maybe 40% said that they had some minor problems. So sometimes it's a matter of making sure that we are good at finding those volunteers and then supporting them. And that's where I think nonprofit agencies and relying on the services available at SPIA and at the Bloomington Volunteer Network have gotten much stronger about their ability to retain volunteers and make them comfortable in their setting.
Well, let's go on to that and talk about management. When we're talking about management of volunteers, what do we need to do better? And kind of add to what Barry said, Beth, if you would.
There is a high turnover rate. So there's something that's going right about volunteerism and volunteer involvement, and then there's some areas where organizations are letting volunteers down. So if you think back about the story about Bella, what is Bella getting out of that? She's getting a chance to act on, to work through a very difficult emotional situation for her. Every volunteer has a story. Every volunteer has some kind of need or expectation. And organizations can really do a great deal of good if they have very effective orientation processes for getting volunteers in the door, understanding how and where they want to be involved, and understanding how to engage them in a way that makes sense to them.
Let's talk about that engagement as well with the Be More Awards, Bet, if you would. Bella was a part of that as well. Why is that such an important part of this whole system?
Well, volunteers, it's very important to thank people that give, right? And so the Be More Awards are a way of celebrating the volunteers and the spirit of volunteerism in the community. 101 people and groups were nominated for the awards this year. It's really a record.
Yes, it is.
It's just amazing. That's 101 stories, 101 people and groups that have found their niche, and I think that's part of the equation in retention. It's also on the volunteers' side that they need to find something that is a good fit for them. Not to just say, well, I'm going to do this without even knowing what this exactly entails. I recommend to people that they try out a few different things before making a commitment. Go to different orientations, learn about the services of those organizations, and see what's a really good fit for them. Then they'll be committed and want to stay.
And we want to mention that Monroe County, you could do that by going to the Volunteer Network, correct?
That's right.
And then if you live outside of Monroe County, where can you go?
We recommend people get in touch with their United Way or their community foundation, and normally those organizations, one or both, will have a list of volunteer opportunities and places to refer to locally, like we have our Bloomington Volunteer Network.
Right, yeah. At the Volunteer Network, we work with about 187 different organizations and have, maybe 425 volunteer opportunities listed on our website. And it's a searchable database, so people can make a profile and say what they're interested in. So we do recommend that people start there and look around to see what the volunteer needs are in the community and then what their strengths are and their skills. So people can go to our website. It's www.bloomington.in.gov/volunteer. And they also are always welcome to call, and I'll walk them through.
Okay, great. We have more to cover in this show. Let's go over to the radio booth for more on this topic with Stan.
Thanks, Ann. We've got Mark Andrews on the phone. Mark is the National Head of Habitat for Humanity. Mark, my first question to you is, in the midst of an economic recession, is it harder to get people convinced that there are others who need help?
Outside the current economic crisis, we typically try to, as a part of our social justice work, let folks know that there are low-income families in need of simple, decent housing in every community. It doesn't matter whether you're in Beverly Hills or the inner city of Chicago. There is always a segment of the population that's unserved in terms of affordable housing.
Well, I mean, here in Bloomington, you've got poverty, you've got homelessness, and you've got committed social service agencies who are working to solve those problems. I'm curious which you think wins out. Is it the problems which don't get a lot of publicity around here, or is it those people who are working to publicize and to solve those problems?
The folks that are in the business of trying to help do eventually win out. Even the underserved, the silent underserved, eventually surface in some entity, in some organization across the spectrum. So it's not an easy process, and community development is not a very paint-by-the-numbers kind of process. Community development requires significant back and forth between the community that needs the services and the community that can provide those. It is not something that is linear. It takes time, and it's not without its challenges.
Mr. Andrews, we appreciate your time. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you very much, Dan.